When I stepped off the plane in Richmond, I thought someone would be there. Maybe my mom, maybe my sister, Victoria. After 12 years serving in the Air Force, a small, welcome home didn't seem too much to hope for. But the only people waiting were strangers checking their phones. I stood there for a while, holding my single duffel bag, watching families hug and cry. My phone buzzed a message from Mom. "Glad you landed safe, sweetheart. Rest up. We're busy with your sister's event tomorrow." Her event was Mom's 70th birthday. Apparently, the Morgan family had turned it into a PR spectacle for Victoria's company, Morgan Tech. It made sense my sister could turn a funeral into a press opportunity if she had to. When I got home, I expected at least a little warmth. Mom was kind, but tired. She'd been swept up in Victoria's planning. The house smelled like catered food and fresh flowers, not home, more like a showroom. Victoria appeared in her tailored suit, phone in hand. She looked me over like she was inspecting a uniform. "Sarah," she said flatly, "I didn't know you were coming this early." "I wanted to help set up," I said. "It's Mom's birthday." She smiled, that kind of tight, polite smile you use when you're seconds away from saying something awful. "You've done enough helping," she said. "Actually, about tomorrow." Her tone changed, the way a general might brief bad news. "It's going to be a big night, press, clients, the board. It's important that everything looks consistent. You showing up in your uniform, or whatever you plan to wear, might distract from the atmosphere." I blinked. "You mean you don't want me there?" She didn't flinch. "I think it's best you sit this one out. You've been away a long time. You wouldn't understand how things work now." I wanted to laugh, or maybe throw her phone into the champagne tower she was probably planning. Instead, I just looked at her and said, "You're right. I wouldn't understand how pretending replaces family." She sighed, as if I was the unreasonable one. "It's not personal, Sarah. You just don't fit the image." That word image hit harder than any bullet I'd dodged overseas. I'd risked my life so people like her could sleep peacefully, and somehow I didn't fit the image. I left the house quietly that night. No dramatic goodbye, no slammed doors. I just packed the small bag I'd brought and drove back to the small apartment I'd rented near the base. The streets were empty, the city lights hitting the windshield like little reminders that I didn't belong anywhere, not in uniform, not at home. Back inside, I dropped my bag and sat by the window. The apartment was small, one table, one chair, a coffee pot that clicked louder than it brewed. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my service medal, still scratched from Afghanistan. The medal caught the light, just enough to remind me who I was, not a guest, not a prop for someone else's success story. I'd earned that shine with sweat, blood, and silence. That night, I thought about calling Victoria to tell her exactly what I thought of her image. But I didn't. Because in the military, we're taught something she'd never understand: restraint. So instead, I poured myself a glass of water, looked out at the city I used to call home, and said out loud, "You don't want me there? Fine. But don't complain when silence becomes the loudest thing in the room." If you've ever come home to find your own family treating you like a stranger, you know the feeling, that quiet ache that doesn't explode. It just settles in your chest and stays there. And if you've ever been underestimated by someone who thinks their title means more than your integrity, you also know that silence isn't weakness. It's training. That's when I made my choice. I wouldn't fight for a seat at their table. I'd build my own. Quick pose. Natural tone for voiceover transition. If you've ever been through something like this where your own family made you feel invisible, tell me in the comments. I read every story. And if you want more true family revenge stories like this one, make sure you subscribe. We tell real stories about justice, dignity, and quiet strength. The next morning, the news was already full of Victoria's face, smiling in her designer gown, waving at cameras. But something about that photo felt different now. I used to see a confident CEO. This time, I saw a woman who needed the world to clap because she couldn't stand her own silence. And me? I stayed home exactly where she wanted me and waited for the storm she didn't see coming. The next evening, I woke up early, old habits. I brewed cheap coffee and watched the rain slide down the window, each drop catching the gray light from the street lamp. Somewhere across town, my sister's charity gala for Mom's birthday was starting. I could almost picture it. Champagne flutes, fake laughter, and Victoria posing like the world owed her applause. I didn't plan to look, but curiosity is a stubborn thing. I opened my phone and scrolled through social media. Within minutes, there it was, photos tagged at the Jefferson Hotel, the Morgan family lined up like a magazine ad. Mom looked beautiful but tired. Victoria looked like she was auditioning for sainthood. And me? I was the ghost missing from the frame. I put the phone down, but before I could close the app, a video auto-played. Someone had recorded the dinner toast. Victoria stood at the center, holding a glass of white wine. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "Tonight isn't just about Mom, it's about family, legacy, and making the Morgans proud." Then a woman's voice off-camera said, "Where's your sister? The one who served in the military?" The pause was long enough to feel sharp. Victoria laughed softly, the kind of laugh that hides venom. "Oh, Sarah? She's busy finding herself, I guess. You know how some people just can't adjust to normal life." The table chuckled. She added, "Last I heard, she's living near the base, probably in some motel or something. But hey, at least she's free, no rules, no responsibilities." Someone laughed harder than they should have. Mom's smile faltered. I didn't move, I just listened. Then Victoria's voice again, this time lower, meaner. "Honestly, she'd only ruin the mood. Can you imagine her showing up in her old uniform? This isn't a parade. All 11. That line hit like a slap. The video ended with people clinking glasses and fake laughter echoing through the speakers. I stared at the screen, jaw tight. Not because I was shocked, because I wasn't. It was the casual cruelty that stung. She didn't just insult me, she erased me. What she didn't know was that the clip wasn't just seen by me, it was already spreading. Someone from the party, probably bored or angry, had uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "CEO mocks her veteran sister at her mom's birthday party." Disgraceful. Within an hour, there were thousands of comments. Who talks about their own sister like that? She served our country, and this is how her family treats her? Morgan Tech better hope this isn't real. I sat there watching it go viral, in real time. The irony was almost poetic. The sister who didn't want me there because I'd ruined the image had just ruined it herself. By midnight, news outlets had picked it up. Number Morgan Tech was trending next to number Respect Our Veterans. Someone dug up old photos of me in uniform from a local newspaper article. The comments turned fierce. One read, "She fought for her country while her sister fought for attention." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the message. "This is ridiculous. Please call me, Victoria." I didn't reply. The next message came fast. "You don't understand how social media works. It's out of control. They're twisting everything I said." I leaned back in my chair, staring at her words. The woman who built her empire on controlling every headline now couldn't control a single video. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not revenge, just calm. Like finally watching the storm hit the right house. The following morning, local news ran the clip again, this time with commentary from veterans. A retired Marine said, "People forget freedom doesn't come from boardrooms. It comes from boots on the ground." That line replayed on every channel. I went for a walk to clear my head. The air smelled like wet pavement and smoke from distant chimneys. A few people recognized me from the viral clip. One woman stopped and said, "You're her, right? The sister? Thank you for your service." I didn't know what to say, so I nodded. Gratitude mixed with something heavier, pity. Maybe, for my sister. By noon, I got a message from Mom. "Honey, please don't hate her. She's panicking. Everything's falling apart." I stared at the words for a long time. Panicking. That was new. Victoria didn't panic. She strategized. That afternoon, my inbox exploded. Journalists, talk shows, podcast hosts. They all wanted interviews. The silent sister. The veteran who stayed home. I declined every single one, because the truth didn't need my voice. It already had millions. Still, I couldn't help wondering how Victoria was handling it. probably drafting apologies that sounded sincere enough to fool her investors. Maybe even calling her PR team, asking how to spin mocking a veteran into misunderstood humor. I poured another cup of coffee, this time smiling. It wasn't the kind of smile you fake for cameras. It was the quiet kind that comes when you realize karma doesn't need your help. That night, the video reached 5 million views. A journalist called it the most ironic family drama of the year. I didn't argue. It was. And as the city lights flickered outside my window, I thought about that table full of people laughing at me. How easy it was for them to forget who pays the price for their peace. But the world hadn't forgotten. Not this time. I turned off my phone, leaned back, and let the silence settle in. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for applause. The kind that waits. The first time I realized how far it had spread was when a friend from the base sent me a screenshot. It wasn't just trending, it had crossed into the mainstream. My sister's words were looping across national headlines, morning talk shows, and veteran forums. One headline read, "CEO Sister Mocks Veteran Sibling Internet Explodes." Another simply said, "The party that ended a reputation." By the time I turned on the TV, Victoria's face was everywhere. The same confident smile she used for every press interview now looked brittle under the weight of the public's outrage. Reporters dissected every second of that video like it was evidence in a trial. Her laughter, the tone in her voice, even the clinking of the glasses had become symbolic, mocking, tone-deaf, cruel. I didn't enjoy watching it. That surprised me. I thought I would. But there was no satisfaction in seeing someone drown, even if they'd pushed you off the bridge first. What I did feel, though, was a strange calm, like the truth was finally doing the heavy lifting for once. At first, Victoria tried to ignore it. She released a short statement through her PR team. Comments made at a private family gathering were taken out of context. I have deep respect for all who serve. It sounded rehearsed, polished, and hollow. The internet wasn't having it. Veterans across the country started posting under the hashtag number Respect Sarah Morgan. I didn't even know who started it. Some of them shared photos in uniform, saying things like, "We all know a Victoria." A week later, Morgan Tech's sponsors began to pull out. One investment partner froze their funding. A defense contractor announced they were reconsidering a joint project. Stock prices dipped. And still, I said nothing. One night, my mom called me. Her voice was softer than I'd heard in years. "Sarah, it's getting bad," she whispered. "She's on the verge of losing everything. Reporters keep calling the house. I don't know what to do." "She'll figure it out," I said. "She's your sister." "So am I," I replied. "She just forgot." "Huh?" There was silence. Then Mom said something that stayed with me. "You were always the quiet one, Sarah. Maybe that's your strength. Maybe it's her punishment." After the call, I scrolled through more clips online. A national news anchor was discussing the story. "We talk about honoring service," he said, "but this family drama has exposed something deeper: how society treats those who come home. This isn't just gossip, it's a mirror." That word mirror hit me. Because for the first time, people weren't just talking about Victoria, they were talking about the way veterans fade into the background once the uniform comes off. The next morning, my building's security guard, an older vet named Frank, handed me a coffee and said, "Saw your sister on TV. She really messed up, huh?" I smiled faintly. "Guess she forgot the first rule of leadership: respect the ones who actually serve." He laughed. "Amen to that." "Oh." Later that day, I got an email from a news producer asking me to appear on Good Morning America. They wanted me to share my side of the story. I declined. My story wasn't about the scandal, it was about survival. I wasn't going to feed the circus. But things were unraveling faster for Victoria. Someone leaked internal emails from Morgan Tech showing that she'd used company funds for image events, including that birthday gala. It became a financial investigation overnight. The board suspended her pending review. The irony was sharp. The same woman who'd told me I'd ruin the image was now watching her empire burn because of her own reflection. Mom called again 2 days later, her voice trembling. "She's been crying all day. Reporters are outside the office. She keeps saying it's not fair." Neither was Afghanistan, I said. But we still showed up. End of 2. I could almost hear her exhale through the phone, that heavy sigh of a mother torn between two daughters, one drowning in shame, one surviving in silence. A few days after that, a reporter found me outside the Veterans Center where I volunteered. "Miss Morgan," he said, "would you like to respond to your sister's apology video?" "Did she apologize to me or the internet?" I asked. He hesitated. "Both, I think." "Ari. Then she can wait for my response the same way I waited for hers in silence." The next morning, her video was everywhere. Victoria sat in front of a neutral gray wall, makeup light, voice trembling just enough to look sincere. She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she deeply regretted her comments, and that she was proud of her sister's service. The comments were brutal. People saw right through it. Too late. Should have respected her before it cost your stock price. Oh. And still, I didn't speak. But inside, I felt something shift. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. The kind of done that doesn't slam doors, it just walks through them and never looks back. That afternoon, while the world argued about us online, I was at the community center teaching a small group of new veterans how to write civilian resumes. One of them, a young guy named Ben, said, "Ma'am, it's cool that you're famous now." I laughed. "Trust me, fame's overrated. Integrity lasts longer." He grinned. "Guess your sister's learning that the hard way." I didn't answer. Some lessons have to hurt to stick. When I left that evening, the sun was setting over the river. I looked out across the water, where the reflection of the skyline shimmered fractured, unsteady, beautiful in its own way. That's when I realized something. The world had seen who my sister really was. But more importantly, I had seen who I'd become, someone who didn't need to fight for validation. The clip didn't destroy me. It freed me. By the end of that week, Richmond looked different. Billboards for Morgan Tech had vanished overnight. News trucks parked outside the company's glass headquarters, their satellite dishes pointing at the storm that used to be my sister's empire. Every time I passed the TV in the cafe across from my apartment, Victoria's face stared back. Eyes red, hair perfect, voice steady only because she'd practiced. Her crisis manager must have been working overtime. I didn't plan on watching, but the volume was already up. Morgan Tech CEO, Victoria Morgan, faces public backlash after comments made about her veteran sister during a private event went viral, the anchor said. Sources confirm the company has lost major defense contracts and is under review for potential misconduct. It was strange hearing my family name repeated by people who'd never met us. Stranger, still, to hear my silence being described as dignified restraint. I hadn't planned anything. I just refused to make noise. Somehow, that quiet had turned into a hurricane. That afternoon, I stopped by Mom's house. She opened the door like she'd aged a decade in a week. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands trembled slightly as she led me into the kitchen. "She's falling apart, Sarah," she said softly. "She doesn't eat. She doesn't sleep. The board might remove her." "She built her image on perfection," I said. "Now she's learning what real life looks like." Mom sat down and folded her hands like she was praying for balance between two worlds. "You sound just like your father," she whispered. "Always calm when things burn." I smiled faintly. "He taught me to stand still in chaos. The Air Force just perfected it." She hesitated, looking at me carefully. "Do you hate her?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the family photo on the wall, the one from before I enlisted. Victoria was already in a designer dress at 21. I was in jeans and a plain white t-shirt, holding a baseball cap. Two sisters who had no idea how far apart they'd grow. "I don't hate her," I said finally. "I just don't owe her my peace anymore." "Oh?" Mom's shoulders dropped, and she nodded slowly. She knew there was no arguing with that kind of truth. As I left, I noticed a delivery van across the street unloading boxes, the Morgan Tech logo printed across them. The driver looked confused, muttering into his phone. Later, I'd learned stores were refusing to stock the products. Retailers were canceling shipments. It wasn't a business problem anymore. It was a moral one. At the same time, my inbox filled with new requests. Interviews, speaking engagements, veterans podcasts. Everyone wanted the silent sister. I said no to all of them. I didn't want to turn my pain into their ratings. That night, I walked to the Riverwalk, my favorite place. When the world got loud, the water was calm, catching the reflection of city lights like a quiet mirror. I pulled my jacket tighter around me. A man approached, maybe mid-40s, in a worn marine jacket. "You Sarah Morgan?" he asked. I nodded cautiously. He reached out his hand. "Name's Duke, served in Iraq. Just wanted to say thanks. You didn't have to speak for us, you just had to exist." I shook his hand. "Guess silence travels faster than speeches." He smiled. "Yeah, but only when it's the truth." When I got home, I saw my sister's name trending again this time. Not because of the video, but because of Morgan Tech's stock crash, 12% down in one day. The headlines were merciless. From boardroom to backlash, Morgan Tech CEO faces crisis of character. And then, a photo of Victoria leaving the office, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, walking past protesters, holding signs that read, "Respect our veterans," and "No honor, no business." I closed my laptop and leaned back. This was the part where most people would celebrate, but I didn't. What I felt wasn't triumph, it was gravity. The weight of seeing consequences fall exactly where they belonged. The next morning, I woke to a knock at my door. When I opened it, Victoria was standing there. No makeup, no cameras, just a woman stripped of her armor. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside. She sat at the kitchen table, the same way she had years ago when she told me I'd never understand her world. Now, that world had collapsed. "I don't even know where to start," she said, voice cracking. "They're suspending me. The investors want me gone." I poured her a glass of water. "Maybe start with 'I'm sorry.'" Her eyes met mine, glossy with tears. "I am. I really am. I didn't mean what I said." "Yes, you did," I interrupted softly. "That's why it hurt." She looked down, twisting the glass between her hands. "You have no idea how hard it's been, Sarah. The pressure, the expectations." I laughed. Not cruelly, just tired. "You think you cornered the market on pressure? Try commanding a rescue unit under fire with no backup. Pressure doesn't excuse arrogance." Her jaw trembled. "I thought I was protecting the family image." I nodded. "And I thought serving my country was protecting the family." We sat there in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that isn't empty, just necessary. Before she left, she said, "The board's meeting tomorrow. I might lose everything." I didn't answer. She paused at the door. "If you just post something, say I didn't mean it, it could help." I met her eyes and said, "You built your empire on noise. You can't ask silence to save it." After she left, I stood by the window again. The rain had started, tapping lightly against the glass, the same rhythm it had the night I came home. Only now, it sounded less lonely, more like balance. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, reflecting a truth my sister had never understood. Reputation is built in front of people, but character is built when no one's watching. And as the rain fell harder, I realized this wasn't the storm. This was the calm before it. The next day, my phone started buzzing before sunrise. It wasn't the usual rhythm of notifications, this was frantic. Missed calls, voicemails, texts, all from Victoria. I ignored them at first. I made coffee, sat on the balcony, and watched the morning light slide down the rooftops. The air was cool, the kind of quiet that feels earned. But her calls kept coming one after another, like the sound of a sinking ship hitting the rocks. Finally, curiosity won. I answered. Her voice came out rushed, shaky, missing that usual edge of control. "Sarah, please, I need your help." "What kind of help?" "The kind that keeps my life from collapsing." She took a breath that sounded like she was running. "They're having an emergency board meeting. The investors want me gone. The media won't stop. People are threatening boycotts. I can't." I cut her off. "You said I'd ruin things by showing up. Looks like I didn't have to." She went silent. I heard her swallow hard on the other end. "I know I deserve that, but please, if you make a statement, just one, say that we talked, that I've apologized. They might reconsider." I didn't speak. Not yet. I let the silence hang there long enough for her to feel the weight of it. Then I said, "You built your whole world on people clapping. Now it's quiet, and you don't know what to do with the silence, do you?" Her voice cracked. "Sarah, I'm begging you. This isn't just my career. Mom's health depends on my insurance, on this job. Please, just think of her." That part hit differently. Mom had been battling arthritis and heart issues for years. She'd always refused to let me help, saying she didn't want to take money from her daughter. In uniform. That was Victoria's line, not mine. "Let me call you back," I said. I hung up before she could say more. I needed to think. When I drove over to Mom's house, she was already awake, sitting by the window in her robe. She looked up as I walked in. "I told her not to call you," she said quietly. "She's scared, Sarah. Truly scared. I can tell. She's been up all night. She says she'll do anything to fix this." I looked around the room. The family photos were still on the wall, but now there was a new frame on the shelf, a screenshot from that viral news story, the one where they'd called me the silent sister. I wasn't sure if it was pride or guilt that made Mom print it. "She brought this on herself," I said. "I know," Mom sighed, "but maybe she finally understands what her words can do." I didn't respond. Instead, I poured her tea and stared out the window. The neighborhood was still the kind of stillness that feels like it's holding its breath. That afternoon, my inbox filled again, not with journalists this time, but with messages from strangers, veterans, mothers, young women who'd been dismissed by their families. One said, "Your silence gave me courage. I stopped apologizing for being who I am." I didn't realize until then how powerful restraint could look from the outside. By evening, Victoria showed up at my door. She looked nothing like the CEO in those magazine spreads. Her makeup was gone, her hair pulled back, her blazer wrinkled. When she walked in, she didn't sit right away, just stood there, clutching her bag like it was the last piece of her identity. "They fired me," she said flatly. "Effective immediately." I nodded slowly. "That must hurt." "It's not just that. My name's ruined. Nobody will hire me now. Every article calls me the disrespectful sister. I can't even go online without death threats." I looked at her carefully. "You spent years controlling narratives. Maybe it's time to face one you can't." Tears started running down her cheeks, streaking her foundation. "I didn't mean it like that, Sarah. I was just trying to impress them. You know how these events are. People expect perfect families, perfect stories." I raised my hand to stop her. "You weren't protecting an image. You were protecting your ego." She froze. I saw the realization hit her, like something heavy sinking into cold water. After a moment, she whispered, "What do you want me to do?" "Start with the truth," I said. "Not for the cameras, for Mom, for yourself." She looked away, then nodded slowly. "I can do that." There was a long pause before she said, "You always make everything look so easy." I laughed, just once. "That's because I learned to stand still while everything burns." "Ugh." Before she left, she hesitated by the door. "You really won't say anything? Not even one post?" I shook my head. "You built your success on noise. I built mine on silence. Let's both live with what we chose." She bit her lip, nodded, and walked out without another word. Later that night, Mom called again. Her voice was warm, but tired. "She's still crying," she said, "but I think something in her broke open. Maybe that's what needed to happen." "Maybe," I said quietly. "Sometimes, people have to lose everything to hear themselves for the first time." As I hung up, I looked around my small apartment plain, quiet and real. No trophies, no cameras, no spotlight, just a few medals, a folded flag, and peace. And for the first time since I came home, I didn't feel invisible. I felt whole. A few days later, a small white envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. My mom's handwriting always leaned a little to the right, neat, careful, like she didn't want to waste space or emotion. I opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery that smelled faintly like her lavender lotion. The first line stopped me cold. "You didn't ruin the birthday, Sarah. You reminded us what family really means." I read that sentence over and over until the ink blurred. She wrote about how, In the days after the video, she'd been embarrassed not by me, but by the realization that she'd let Victoria's world of appearances replace something real. She said, "I raised 2 daughters, one who chased admiration and one who earned respect. I just never realized which one I should have been proud of sooner." I sat there for a long time, letter trembling in my hand, the weight of those words pressing deep into my chest. All those years, I'd felt like the shadow of the Morgan family, the one who didn't belong in the photo, the one who didn't fit the image suddenly. It didn't matter. I didn't need a seat at their table anymore. The truth had built me my own. By the time I looked up, the afternoon light had shifted, painting the wall in thin stripes through the blinds. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it on the mantel next to my service medal. They looked right together, two kinds of honor, finally in the same room. That evening, I stopped by Mom's house. She was sitting in the garden, wrapped in a blanket, her teacup steaming in the cool air. She looked up and smiled softly. "You got it," she said. "I did." "Did it sound like me?" "It sounded like the mom I remember," I said quietly. She patted the seat beside her. "Your sister dropped by earlier." I sat down. "How is she?" "Lost," Mom said honestly, "but not hopeless." And the yard was quiet except for the rustle of dry leaves. She looked out at the trees, then back at me. "You know, when you joined the Air Force, I was terrified. I thought I'd lose you to war. Turns out I lost you to distance, not miles, just misunderstanding." I smiled faintly. "You never really lost me. You just stopped looking in the right direction." She reached out and took my hand, her grip firm despite the tremor in her fingers. "You've always been stronger than both of us put together. I just wish it didn't take a scandal for people to see it." I shook my head. "It wasn't about people seeing it, Mom. It was about me remembering it." For a while, we sat in comfortable silence, the kind that says everything without words. Then she said, "You know what she told me?" She said when you didn't answer her calls, she finally understood what it felt like to be invisible. "That's not revenge," I said. "That's empathy finding its way back home." She nodded. "Maybe that's the only kind that lasts." Before I left, she handed me a small box. Inside was an old family photo, the three of us at the beach, long before money or titles or pride got between us. "Keep it," she said. "I think you've earned the right to own our memories now." Driving home, I realized something had shifted. The anger that used to flare every time I thought about Victoria had cooled into something quieter. Not forgiveness, but perspective. Like a scar that doesn't hurt anymore, just reminds you where the wound used to be. That night, I placed the photo on my desk, next to the letter. Then I opened my laptop to find dozens of new messages, journalists still asking for statements, TV shows still chasing the story. But one email stood out. It was from a producer at Good Morning America. The subject line read, "We'd like to feature your story. Not the scandal, but the soldier." I almost deleted it, but something about it felt different. The message said they wanted to highlight veterans who quietly redefine resilience. It wasn't about the drama anymore, it was about what came after. I didn't decide right away. Instead, I called Mom. "What do you think?" I asked. She hesitated. "I think you've spent enough time being silent for others. Maybe now's the time to speak not for revenge, but for respect." I thought about it through the night. Not because I needed attention, I didn't, but because maybe the story wasn't really mine anymore. It belonged to every veteran who came home to a world that clapped for the uniform but ignored the person wearing it. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I replied to the email with one line. "I'll do it, but only if we talk about service, not scandal." An hour later, they wrote back, "Deal." Head. I leaned back in my chair, the sunlight spilling through the window, warming the letter from Mom on the table. I traced the words one last time. "You didn't ruin the birthday." She was right. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped playing along with the illusion. And in that quiet realization, I found something better than revenge validation. Not from applause, but from peace. The studio lights were softer than I expected, warm, almost kind. A production assistant adjusted my mic and smiled politely, like she'd been briefed not to mention the obvious. Across the stage, a screen displayed the headline, The silent soldier, a sister, a scandal, a lesson in respect. When the host, Diane Marshall, walked in, she shook my hand and said, "Sarah, we're not here for the drama, we're here for the truth." That was the first time anyone had said that to me on national television. During the countdown, I took a slow breath. 12 years in the military had trained me for worse aircraft failures, desert storms, people breaking under pressure, but not this kind of spotlight. This time, there were no commands, no rank, no mission, just my voice. When the red light blinked on, Diane smiled at the camera. Today, we're speaking with retired Air Force officer Sarah Morgan, known to millions online as the Silent Soldier. Her story started with a family video and turned into a national conversation about honor, humility, and healing. I listened quietly, waiting for my cue. Then she turned to me. "Sarah," she said gently, "why didn't you defend yourself when the video went viral?" I looked at her, steady. Because truth doesn't need an audience to be real. People saw what they needed to see. I didn't need to add commentary. She nodded. "But your silence, it spoke volumes. Did you realize it would have this kind of impact?" I smiled slightly. No. Silence was the only thing I had left that hadn't been used against me. Turns out, it carried farther than I ever shouted. A ripple of quiet laughter came from behind the cameras. Diane leaned forward. "Your sister, has she reached out?" "She did," I said simply. And I listened. But listening doesn't mean forgetting. There was a brief pause, the kind that anchors live TV. Then she said, "You've become something of a symbol for veterans, especially women who served. What do you want them to take from your story?" I looked straight into the lens, into that invisible crowd of strangers who'd made me part of their morning coffee conversations. That dignity isn't given, it's kept. You don't need permission to exist in peace. And sometimes, the loudest fight you'll ever win is the one you refuse to have. The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet, respectful quiet. I could see the crew pause, a few nodding unconsciously. For once, silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was powerful. When the interview ended, Diane took off her earpiece and said, "Sarah, that was beautiful. I hope you know this isn't just a headline anymore. You've started a movement." I didn't know what to say, so I thanked her and walked off set. Outside, the sun hit me like I hadn't felt it in weeks. It was early autumn, the air sharp, the kind that wakes you up. My phone was buzzing again, but this time it wasn't chaos. It was messages from veterans, teachers, parents. A man named Javier, who'd served in the Marines, wrote, "You said what we've been feeling for years. We salute you." Another message from a young woman read, "I didn't talk to my sister for 3 years. I called her today." I stopped reading after that one. Some victories don't need a scoreboard. Later that evening, I met Mom for dinner at a small cafe downtown. She hugged me the moment I walked in tight, trembling, the kind of hug that says everything words can't. "I saw the interview," she said. "You made us proud. Not just me, the whole country." "I wasn't trying to," I said. "I just told the truth." She smiled. "That's why it worked." Halfway through our meal, she pulled out her phone and showed me something. "Morgan Tech just announced a donation," she said. "To what?" "To your veteran fund. $2 million. I stared at her. "You're joking." She shook her head. "It says it's from the board of directors in your name. They're calling it the Second Mission Fund." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That's what I was going to name it. "I know," Mom said softly. "Your sister must have told them." I didn't reply. I just sat there, letting the words sink in. For the first time in months, the storm that had followed me everywhere started to fade. Not because the damage was undone, it never would be, but because something better had taken its place: acknowledgement. When I left the cafe, the city lights flickered against the wet pavement, and I thought about the strange symmetry of it all. The same world that had laughed at my silence was now celebrating it. The same sister who'd built her empire on applause was now learning how to live without it. I walked along the sidewalk, passing a street musician playing a slow version of "America the Beautiful" on his trumpet. The notes carried through the night air, imperfect but sincere. It reminded me of my unit's last night in Kabul, when someone played the same song through a broken speaker as we packed up. Back then, I thought I understood patriotism flags, service, sacrifice. But standing there now, I realized it was something quieter. It was knowing who you are when no one's clapping. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed again. A message from Victoria. I watched your interview. You were calm, honest, and right. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I'm trying to do better. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, because there was nothing left to say. I put the phone down, started the engine, and drove home through the quiet streets of Richmond. Every stoplight, every turn, felt like a small piece of peace finding its way back. And as I parked in front of my apartment, I caught my reflection in the window, calm, steady, unshaken. For the first time, I didn't see the silent sister. I just saw myself. The morning after the interview aired, the internet looked different. Not the wild chaos of outrage that had filled every feed weeks before this time. It was quiet, steady, almost reverent. Articles called it a national reset. People weren't talking about the scandal anymore. They were talking about accountability, respect, and what dignity looked like when the noise faded. Meanwhile, Morgan Tech was bleeding. Stock values down another 18%. 3 key investors withdrew. And the most poetic part? Every news segment about the company opened with a clip from my interview. The woman they once called the embarrassment had become the standard of integrity that their CEO had failed to meet. Victoria had been silent since that text message. I didn't expect to hear from her again, but life has a way of circling back. That afternoon, I got an email not from her, but from the board of Morgan Tech. The subject line read, Invitation, Philanthropy Initiative Partnership, Second Mission Fund. I opened it and blinked twice before reading it again. They weren't asking for an apology or a photo or a PR statement. They wanted to make a donation $2 million to help fund veteran rehabilitation and job transition programs. The same fund I'd been planning to start with the money from my retirement savings. They wanted it to bear my name. For a long minute, I just sat there, staring at the screen. My sister's company, the empire that had mocked me, shunned me, erased me, was now rebuilding its reputation through the very cause I stood for. Mom called an hour later. I could hear the smile in her voice before she said a word. They're doing it, honey. The board voted unanimously this morning. They said it was Victoria's suggestion. Did they really? I asked, skeptical. She's been quiet, but different. I think she's starting to see what really matters. I didn't answer. My heart wanted to believe her, but my head reminded me that redemption and rebranding often wear the same outfit. That evening, I attended the signing event at the Morgan Tech headquarters. It wasn't my idea. The Department of Veterans Affairs had asked me to represent the recipient side of the fund. The press was there, but this time it wasn't chaos, it was ceremony. Victoria stood across the room, thinner than before, her posture softer. When she saw me, she hesitated, then walked over. You look good, she said quietly. You look tired. I am, she admitted. But I guess you don't get to sleep much when you're rebuilding from zero. Her honesty disarmed me. For once, there was no performance, no calculated charm. Just a person standing inside the wreckage of her own choices. When it was time for the signing, she spoke briefly to the cameras. A few months ago, my actions reminded me that success means nothing if it costs you respect. Today, I want to help restore what I damaged. Not for headlines, but for healing. She turned toward me. And I want to thank my sister for teaching me the hardest and most important lesson of my life, that silence can be stronger than pride. The room stayed quiet. No applause, no murmurs, just a kind of shared pause. She meant it, I could tell. When the papers were signed, the flashbulbs went off like lightning. For a second, I almost laughed. Months ago, I couldn't step into this building without being told I didn't belong. Now my name was etched into their philanthropy wing. Life has an ironic sense of humor. After the event, we ended up in the parking lot, standing by our cars under a soft drizzle. She looked at me like she was searching for something, absolution, maybe, or just acknowledgement. I know it doesn't fix what I said, she murmured, but I hope it's a start. I nodded. It's a good one. Mom says you're thinking of expanding the fund nationally. That's the plan. Let me help, she said. No cameras, no press. Just help. Oh. I studied her face for a long second. She wasn't lying this time. Whatever walls she'd built over the years had finally cracked. "Then show up," I said simply. That's all I ever wanted. For the first time in years, she smiled without pretense. "I can do that." We didn't hug. It didn't feel right yet. Some bridges aren't rebuilt in one day. They're crossed in silence, plank by plank. That night, I went home and poured myself a glass of wine, sitting by the window with the city lights flickering below. My phone buzzed non-stop, with notifications, veterans groups offering partnership, small businesses pledging donations. One message stood out. A note from a woman I'd never met. "My brother hasn't spoken to our family in 5 years. After watching your story, I called him. Thank you for reminding us that forgiveness doesn't have to be loud. Haven't he?" I read it twice, then leaned back and closed my eyes. In the distance, thunder rolled over the James River. Not violent, just steady, echoing like the sound of change. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but earns it. Morgantek's empire had collapsed, but from its ruins came something cleaner, quieter, almost sacred. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the forgotten sister. I felt like someone who had turned silence into substance. And, as the rain began to fall harder against the glass, I realized not all collapse is destruction. Some of it is creation disguised as loss. A week after the Morgantek signing, I found myself standing in front of the VA Community Center, watching volunteers unload boxes labeled Second Mission Fund. Each one had the new logo printed in crisp navy blue, a pair of open wings, the shape inspired by the Air Force insignia. I hadn't designed it, but I recognized the thought behind it. It was quiet, strong, and simple. Inside, veterans were already gathering for the first orientation. The program had grown faster than I expected. Training, housing support, job placement. People who'd spent years feeling forgotten now had a place that said, "You matter." That was enough for me. What I didn't expect that morning was to see a black sedan pull up to the curb. The door opened, and Victoria stepped out. No bodyguards, no driver, just her. She was holding a plain notebook and wearing jeans for the first time since I could remember. "Before you ask," she said, walking up, "I'm not here for cameras. I'm here for work." I nodded toward the volunteers. "You'll fit right in. We've got a few boxes left." She actually smiled a small, uncertain smile. "You're serious?" "I don't do symbolism, Victoria. Grab a clipboard." She followed me inside, and for the next 2 hours, she didn't complain once. She unpacked donations, took notes, even laughed with a few of the vets. The same woman who once measured her worth in brand deals was now taping signs that read, "Welcome home" on folding tables. During lunch break, we sat outside under the awning. A breeze carried the smell of barbecue from a nearby food truck, and for the first time in years, we talked without calculation. She stared down at her notebook. "Do you ever think about what went wrong?" "All the time," I said. "I used to think I was protecting the family name," she said quietly. "Turns out I was just protecting my reflection." "That's the thing about mirrors," I said. "They show you everything, even the cracks you'd rather ignore." She nodded slowly, tracing the edge of the notebook with her thumb. "When that video went viral, I thought my life was over. But maybe it was just reset." "Maybe," I said. "Some lives need a reset before they can start being real." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with everything we'd never said. The jealousy, the pride, the years of pretending. Finally, she said, "Do you hate me?" I looked at her carefully. "No. Hating you would mean I still cared about your approval." She laughed once, not bitter, but relieved. "You really don't pull punches, do you? Not when I've spent half my life taking them." Her laughter faded, and she turned serious again. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I can start showing up for something bigger than myself." "Then do it," I said. "Show up. Not just when it's convenient, not when people are watching. Do it when it's quiet. That's where character lives." She nodded. "You sound like Dad. He'd probably say I finally learned to shut up and act." "Funny," she said. "That's exactly what he used to tell me too." The afternoon passed in easy silence. When the last box was stacked, and the vets started leaving, She stood by the door, shaking hands with each one of them. No cameras, no applause, just real gratitude. It suited her better than the boardroom ever did. Later, as we locked up, she handed me a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something," she said. "Not a speech. Just something I needed to say." When I opened it, I saw her handwriting uneven, but honest. For years, I measured success by how many people clapped when I walked into a room. My sister taught me that integrity means staying the same when no one's clapping. I mocked her strength because it reminded me of what I lacked. I see that now. I folded the paper and handed it back. "Keep it. It's not a confession if you're waiting for me to validate it." She looked up, eyes glassy. "Do you forgive me?" "Forgiveness isn't something I give," I said quietly. "It's something you earn by being different tomorrow than you were yesterday." That seemed to land. She nodded once, tucking the paper into her pocket like a promise. We stood there a while longer, watching the last of the volunteers leave. The streetlights were flickering on, their glow soft against the fading sky. "Mom wants to have dinner," she said finally. "Just the three of us. No speeches, no reporters, just family." He hesitated. "You think she can handle both of us in the same room?" "She says she's waited long enough." I smirked. "Then I guess I'll bring dessert." As she walked toward her car, I caught her reflection in the window, tired but lighter. For the first time, she didn't look like the CEO of anything. She just looked like my sister. When her car pulled away, I stayed there a little longer, leaning against the door. The night air was cool and steady, the kind that feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. The reckoning between us wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't end with tears or hugs. It ended with truth. And sometimes, that's the only kind of closure that lasts. Inside, the lights of the community center glowed against the dark windows, a reminder that even after the loudest storms, there's always something worth rebuilding quietly, piece by piece. The dinner at Mom's house happened on a Thursday. The air smelled like baked chicken and rosemary, her way of keeping peace through food. The table was smaller than I remembered, or maybe it just felt that way, because for once, no one was performing. No decorations, no photographers, no speeches. Just 3 plates, 3 forks, and one family trying to learn how to breathe in the same space again. Mom sat between us like a referee who'd finally retired. "Before anyone says anything," she began, "I want to make one thing clear. This dinner isn't about fixing the past. It's about stopping it from owning us." Victoria nodded first, which already surprised me. "Fair enough," she said quietly. We started eating in silence. The clink of silverware was the only sound for a while, until Mom looked up and smiled faintly. "You both used to fight over who got the last biscuit. Now you're fighting over who gets the last word." "I do whine." That earned a small laugh from both of us, awkward but real. Halfway through dinner, Victoria put down her fork. "You know," she said, "I used to think success meant being unshakable, untouchable, but standing still doesn't mean you're strong. Sometimes it just means you're frozen." I looked at her for a moment. "That's a lesson worth keeping." She met my eyes. "I learned it the hard way." Mom nodded, her face softening. "Maybe that's how most of us learn anything that matters." End quote. For the first time in years, the tension between us didn't feel like a wall. It felt like air finally clearing after a storm. After dinner, Mom handed us both coffee mugs, the old chipped ones from our childhood. Mine still had the faded Air Force logo she'd glued on years ago. "You used to drink cocoa out of that before bed," she said. "I remember," I replied, smiling. "You said it would make me brave." "It worked," she said. "Just took a few decades to prove it." We sat there for a long while, talking about small things. Dad's old records, the treehouse we never finished, the summer we painted the fence and argued over the color. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something quieter, gentler, a restoration that didn't need an announcement. Later that week, I returned to the community center. The second mission fund was growing faster than we could organize it. Veterans from across the state were writing in, offering to volunteer. Local schools started partnerships to help with family reintegration programs. Even corporations, ones that had once ignored us, wanted to contribute. One afternoon, as I reviewed new applications, a letter slid across my desk. It wasn't from a veteran this time. It was from a teenage girl. My dad served in the Air Force. He's been quiet since he came home. We saw you on TV. He cried for the first time in years. He said you reminded him of why he joined in the first place. Thank you for making silence feel like strength again. I read it twice, then pinned it on the board next to Mom's letter. Some people hang medals. I hang proof that quiet can move mountains. When the local paper came to do a follow-up story, the reporter asked me, "What do you call what's happened between you and your sister?" I thought for a second. "Balance," I said. "Not forgiveness, not revenge, just balance." Oh? The headline the next day read, "From Betrayal to Balance, the Silent Soldier's Second Mission." A week later, Victoria showed up again, this time with a few of her old colleagues, ready to donate tech equipment for training programs. She stayed the entire day, handing out laptops, talking to veterans, organizing the supply closet. No cameras, no statements, just work. Before she left, she stopped by my office. "You know," she said, "you're better at this leadership thing than I ever was." "Aggression, different kind of battlefield," I replied. "Yeah," she said, smiling, "and you're winning this one too." After she left, I walked out to the parking lot and stood for a moment under the fading light. The sky was streaked with gold and gray, like two things that shouldn't mix but somehow do. It reminded me of something my old commanding officer used to say before deployment. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the discipline to stay steady inside it. I finally understood what he meant. When I drove home that evening, the roads were quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty anymore. I passed the Jefferson Hotel, the same place where my sister once toasted to her own image. Now, their marquee banner read, "Proud partner of the Second Mission Fund." I laughed out loud, shaking my head. Life has a cruel sense of irony, but sometimes it uses that irony to heal you. Back at home, I made tea, opened my window, and let the night air drift in. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Dinner again next week?" "She's bringing dessert this time." I texted back, "Tell her I'll bring the biscuits." For the first time in years, that message didn't carry sarcasm, just peace. And as the city lights glimmered outside, I realized the best kind of revenge isn't destruction or silence. It's restoration, when you walk back into the same story that once broke you and rewrite it with grace. It had been almost 6 months since the chaos began, and in a way, it felt like I'd lived two different lives, one defined by noise and another by stillness. The funny thing was, I didn't miss the noise. Not even a little. That morning, I drove back to Langley Air Force Base for the first time in years. The guard at the gate saluted as I handed him my ID, his posture straight, crisp, like I used to be. He glanced at the badge, then at me, and said, "Welcome back, ma'am." Those words hit harder than I expected. Welcome back. Not "thank you for your service," not "you used to be one of us." Just back. Inside, the base smelled the same. Coffee, fuel, and the faint tang of metal. It's strange how scents can pull you back into a version of yourself you thought you'd left behind. I was there to take a new position, not as a pilot this time, but as an ethics and leadership advisor for incoming officers. The role came after my story went public, and the Department of Defense decided to create a program for moral resilience and reintegration. They asked if I'd help build it. When I first got the offer, I hesitated. I'd spent years proving I didn't need the uniform to have worth. But I realized something: the uniform wasn't the problem. The silence was never about leaving service. It was about reclaiming the meaning of it. As I walked through the hallway, familiar faces nodded. Some smiled. Some just stared, unsure what to say to the woman who'd become a headline. I didn't hold it against them. The military teaches you how to survive chaos, but not always how to face the quiet after it. The classroom I was assigned to was small, 15 recruits waiting for someone to tell them what honor looked like in the real world. I looked around the room, at their straight backs and polished boots, and saw younger versions of myself ready to serve, ready to prove, not yet ready to question. "Good morning," I started. "My name is Captain Sarah Morgan, retired. You've probably seen my name somewhere you shouldn't have." That broke the ice. A few chuckles rippled through the room. "I'm not here to talk about scandal," I said. "I'm here to talk about how you carry integrity when no one's looking." I? One of the recruits raised his hand. Ma'am, is it true your sister said those things on camera? I nodded. It's true. And you never said anything back? No, I said simply. Because sometimes silence is the only thing that keeps the truth from turning into noise. They were quiet after that, not out of awkwardness, but reflection. I continued. You'll learn that in the military, people will test your patience, your principles, your sense of right and wrong. You'll think respect is earned by shouting louder. It's not. It's earned by standing still while others lose their balance. A young woman in the front row asked, So what do you do when your own family doesn't respect you? I paused for a moment, remembering that birthday party I wasn't invited to, the empty chair, the laughter that tried to erase me. You stand anyway, I said. Because your worth isn't measured by how people treat you. It's measured by how you respond when they don't. End of note. The room stayed silent for a long time after that. Not the awkward kind of silence, the kind that sticks because it's true. When the session ended, one of the recruits came up to me. He looked barely 20. Ma'am, he said. I called my dad last night after seeing your story. We haven't talked in 2 years. I just wanted to say thanks. I smiled. That's your first mission accomplished. Later that day, I stood outside near the hangar, watching a training jet streak across the sky. Its sound split the air cleanly, leaving behind that sharp, echoing silence only a pilot really understands. I closed my eyes and let it pass over me. It felt like coming home. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed a message from Victoria. Mom said you're back on base. I'm proud of you. I don't say that lightly. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back. I know, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you too. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was peace. Driving home, the highway stretched out ahead, the late afternoon light slanting through the trees. For once, the world felt even, balanced like two sides of the same story finally holding steady. When I reached the city, I stopped by the community center to check on things. Volunteers were still there, sorting boxes, updating records. On the wall, someone had painted a quote in bold letters. Forgiveness isn't letting them back in, it's letting yourself go free. Oh. I didn't write it, but I might as well have. Before I left, I stood by the window, watching the last rays of sunlight fade behind the skyline. Somewhere out there, my sister was probably finishing another day trying to rebuild her life. And maybe for the first time, we were both finally doing something that mattered quietly, separately, but with the same purpose. The sound of a plane roared faintly in the distance, fading into the horizon. I didn't look up this time. I didn't need to. Some parts of you never stop flying, even after you've landed. The next spring, the invitation arrived on cream-colored stationery, with a blue and gold seal at the top. United States Veterans Memorial Day Ceremony, Washington, D.C. I almost set it aside after all. I had attended plenty of ceremonies before, but at the bottom, in neat black print, it said, Guest Speaker, Captain Sarah Morgan, Ret. Service, silence, and strength. I stared at it for a long moment, then laughed under my breath. Life really did have a sense of irony. The same world that once ignored me now wanted to hear my voice. The morning of the ceremony was clear and bright, the kind of day that looks almost too perfect to be real. The air smelled faintly of rain and cut grass. Rows of white chairs lined the reflecting pool, facing the marble stage draped in flags. As I walked to my seat, I noticed faces old, young, in uniform, in civilian clothes. Some were families holding framed photos. Some were veterans standing quietly with hands clasped behind their backs. A few even nodded in recognition. Not the celebrity kind, just the kind that says, "We get it." When my name was announced, the applause was brief but warm. I stepped up to the podium, adjusted the mic, and looked out over the sea of faces. For a moment, I thought of Victoria, how she used to crave this kind of moment. The spotlight, the perfect angle. I smiled softly. I didn't crave it. I just wanted to honor what had brought me here. My father once told me, I began, that service isn't about medals or uniforms, it's about the choices you make when no one's watching. I didn't understand that until I came home and realized the quietest battles are sometimes the hardest to win. A breeze moved through the crowd, stirring the flags behind me. Silence, I continued, isn't weakness. It's control. It's what keeps you from letting pain turn into noise. When my family forgot what respect meant, I thought silence was my punishment. Turns out, it was my power. For a second, the only sound was the wind. Then, slowly, people began to rise. Not in thunderous applause, but in a quiet standing acknowledgement, the kind that matters most. After the ceremony, as people mingled, I saw her, Victoria. Standing a few rows back, sunglasses on, clutching a small bouquet of white lilies. When our eyes met, she smiled small, tentative, real. I nodded, and that was enough. Some things don't need words anymore. Later, she walked over while I was packing my notes. "You were incredible," she said. "Thanks," I replied. "You came a long way for a 15-minute speech." She shrugged. "I owed you at least that." We stood there for a moment, looking at the memorial wall gleaming under the sunday. "Mom would have loved this," she said. "She would have," I agreed. "She'd probably tell us to stop trying so hard to look strong and just be strong." Victoria laughed lightly. "She did say that, didn't she?" We watched the crowd thin out, families hugging, soldiers shaking hands. She turned to me again. "I don't know if I'll ever make things right," she said quietly, "but I'm trying. Every day. That's all anyone can do," I said. Before she left, she pressed something into my hand, a folded note. Later, when I opened it, it simply read, "You didn't ruin anything. You rebuilt everything." That night, back in Richmond, I stopped by the community center. The building was alive with laughter and motion volunteers sorting donations, vets teaching classes, kids helping with boxes. A banner hung above the entrance. Second Mission Fund. Serve again, live again. I walked inside, greeted by familiar faces and the smell of coffee. One of the volunteers waved me over. "Captain Morgan, someone dropped this off for you." It was a framed photo, the three of us at Mom's dinner table, the one from a few months ago. Below it, in Mom's handwriting, a line I'd never noticed before. "Some families find peace when they stop trying to win and start trying to understand." I set it on the front desk, next to a small plaque engraved with the fund's motto. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the chatter of people working side by side, it all felt like the sound of redemption. Outside, the sky had turned violet, the last light stretching across the river. I stood at the door for a long while, watching the reflections shimmer. The world was still loud news, politics, noise, but inside, everything was calm. It struck me then that justice hadn't come from humiliation or revenge. It had come from patience, from letting truth do its work, while I built something better. I thought about all the versions of myself that had led here: the young pilot chasing approval, the broken daughter left out of a birthday, the woman who stayed silent and watched her world burn. They all lived somewhere inside me, but now they'd settled into one steady truth. Peace doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives when you've earned it. As I locked up the building and started walking toward my car, the night air carried the faint sound of a bugle playing taps from a nearby base. The notes were soft, echoing through the trees, fading into silence. Maybe that was the point. Not every victory needs to shout. Some are meant to whisper, steady, quiet, complete. And in that silence, standing under the pale glow of the streetlight, I smiled to myself and thought, maybe I did ruin her illusion, but I built my peace instead. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that truth and quiet strength can rebuild what betrayal tried to destroy, subscribe to the channel. Here, we tell cheating stories, revenge stories, and family justice stories, not for the drama, but for the dignity that follows. Because at the end of every husband betrayal, every family humiliation, and every quiet comeback, there's one truth that never changes. The best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's peace, earned in silence.